So I'm going to talk about a couple things. I don't know, pull something up for me.
Which one do you want? You got the Z sketch or the protected?
Well, let's talk about this since it just came up. So the intersection of Hunsaker, Irving, and River Road, and this is not it, but this does a good job of coloring in sort of what's supposed to happen, because I think people don't understand what the overall vision is, and so it's hard to look at what's out there now and understand what that's going to look like when it's done, because it's just a bunch of pieces sort of hanging out in space right now. And it's unfinished, and it feels very unfinished. And so folks have a lot of questions about that. The opportunity that we had at this intersection was that we got some funding through ODOT, I think through ODOT, to rebuild this intersection. And as we were looking at this intersection and all the needs that it had, keeping in mind that there's also a bus station down here, is that we've got people walking, people biking, people trying to get to the bus, and of course, people driving. And so what this is doing is it's actually increasing the number of lanes for people driving because there was a lot of delay at that intersection. But it's also taking people on bikes and sort of removing them from the roadway to eliminate conflicts. And that's what this is demonstrated by these green lines. So the path of the bike, when this is done, folks have been, well, you try to get me over here and then the bike lane's over here. Eventually, it's going to go up and around, and then you'll use the pen signal, and you'll probably get a leading interval for that. So you'll be moving separate from the traffic that's turning across, and then you'll come back out here and then back onto River Road. If you want to turn left, you don't have to get out into the travel lane and sort of hang out there until the light turns green. You do this, sort of treat it like a roundabout, and you sort of go around the outside of the intersection. Most of the crashes that we have in an urban environment occur at intersections. And that's because there's a lot of mental load there. What's that person going to do? Is that light going to turn green, or yellow, or how much time do I have? And what's that person doing? And why are they going that way? And so we're trying to eliminate some of the variables, or at least put them in separate spaces to make it more predictable. And that's what this is going to do. This is our first one. And so I can't point to one and say this is exactly how it's supposed to look, but they exist. There's some in Portland, there's some in Bend. I was on vacation recently, and I drove through a number of states and rode my bike, and these are becoming more common because if we want more folks to ride bikes, they want to feel more secure at busy intersections, and this is the confluence of two pretty busy roads. So we want to make that feel safer and less scary. And this is one of the ways to do that. We will see how it works. Now, to the point of, well, why has this taken so long? I wish you could be in some of our meetings. Why indeed? The big problem that we had was that there was a giant, actually go to the next one. There's a page on this. There was a giant, this is the intersection. You see the little offset from what I just showed, and just consider that these are sort of, the gray lines are actually green lines, and that's the path of the bike. There's a giant pole up here, and it carried electricity to everybody. And we needed somebody to move it. We needed the owner to move it. And we thought that we had that scheduled years ago. And in some ways we did, but there's a lot happening in the utilities world. And there are things like fires. And so we were not able to move that pole at all until very recently. And that delayed all of the work that could happen on the north end of that intersection. So you'll see that all of the work pretty much is done on the south side. Of course, we got to add striping, we've got to tie things in, we've got to add signage and make it look like a thing, because right now it's just a couple pieces sort of floating in space. But when we tie it all together, it'll make more sense. And now it looks like I just went by there, and it looks like there's some pipes and stuff here too. So what I think is happening, and I wasn't able to reach the project manager today, is they're also replacing some water lines up here, which was not part of our project. And so again, utilities have the same constraints that we have in terms of finding contractors or enough people to do the work, and there's a lot of work to do. And so this was not prioritized, unfortunately, and that has led to a lot of delay, too much delay, quite frankly, and we apologize for that. This should have been done already, but we're doing our best to make sure that folks are doing what they said that they would do on a more reasonable schedule so that we can button this up and get out of here. But eventually it will look more like this. So dedicated turn lanes in each direction, and then through lanes as well. And so that should help the traffic a little bit because we actually did widen this intersection out from where it was. The pedestrian environment will be a little bit better too because these sidewalks are set back from where they were. And then the bikes will be protected from the travel lanes through grade separation. So actually sort of be up on a different, almost like a sidewalk through here. So again, it's a newer concept. We're leading with safety on all of our projects, as Logan just explained. We're looking at data. We're seeing where people are having crashes, and we're seeing what types of innovations and mitigations are available. And when we have an opportunity like we did here to completely rebuild the thing from scratch, what's best practice? What should we do? Can we make that happen? So we're trying to make that happen. And unfortunately, just from a contractor perspective and timing, this one has taken way longer than it should have. But when this is done, I think it'll work a lot better than it does now, and it will perform safer than it currently does. What's that?
What's the completion date?
Don't have that.
Question.
I can get back to you with an email once I figure that out.
Is this River Road?
No, River Road is north-south. Yeah, it's sort of offset. Yeah.
And does the completion whatever happened at this intersection, that exactly when we rebuild or Hunsaker kind of
Separate projects. Yeah, so do you know what the schedule is for Hunsaker? I think it's next year.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, so we're starting Hunsaker next year. This should get done this year. And so this intersection will be up and open and ready to go before we start on Hunsaker.
So if you're a bicyclist heading north on River Road.
Yep.
You
Over here.
get diverted,
Yep.
you have to push a signal to keep going north.
Correct.
So you always get stopped if you're a bicyclist. You don't get to keep
Unless
going.
there's somebody in front of you. And so this is the idea of, you might have heard critical mass, where you get a lot of people riding bikes. So the person in front of you has already pushed that button. We're starting to see that happen downtown on 13th and on High and on 8th. If you've got somebody half a block in front of you, they've already done that. And you just ride behind them and it works well. If you're there by yourself, yes, it needs more delay. And that's something that we're wrestling with right now, because there are folks who will choose not to comply with this signal because they don't want to wait that extra interval of signal changes. And they're just going to go when they go. We're trying to design this to be the safest facility, and so that you don't have to think very much when you get on your bike. And again, that's what we've been told. And when we survey folks, if you felt safer, if you didn't really have to think about it, if you didn't know how to use everything that we put out there in terms of signs and markings, and you could just do it, more people would do it. So this is allowing you to sort of shut your brain off. I'm going to look for the green. I'm going to ride on the green. When I get to a button that says push, I push the button. And if you do all of that, you'll have a smooth trip, but that trip might take longer. And what we're hearing is from folks who ride all the time right now who don't have any of those conveniences. Well, but that's longer for me. I'm comfortable doing all of the things that people who don't ride don't want to do. And that's why you're riding, quite frankly. But we've got a very small percentage of people who are riding, and we want this many people to start riding bikes. So we have to do things like this to get them interested in trying cycling.
So does the through traffic bike then have priority over the right turn auto? Like you would if it was a normal road? When I push that signal, do I get the green and they get the red? Or do I get the red until they're all done turning?
So you're not going to have a bike signal. You're going to have the pedestrian signal. So people walking and biking are going to go at the same time. What I mentioned was, if you're there at the outset, so say this is red and this is green, and you get here on a red and you push this, you get a leading interval. So this will turn walk before this turns green. So you should be way up here by the time this person starts to do that.
But if it's not a red light, I'm getting there, everyone's going north, I'm going north.
You'll have to stop.
And then I press the button, well, I get the green and then they have to stop or no? I have to wait for the next interval of the light.
We'll have to. That question is like on 13th Avenue, if you use that. Okay. You get a bike signal at the beginning of the green phase for 13th and at the end of the green phase for 13th. So you get 2 shots at an east-west on 13th if you're on a bike. You don't on High Street and you don't on 8th Street. We're looking at that because people have noticed, hey, I'm not getting 2 green cycles. And so it's something we can do. But we would have to do the math and figure out what that means for the traffic cues in each direction. So all sorts of possibilities. It's going to start with 1 phase. If we do get that critical mass and a lot of people are coming through, then we have lots of opportunities to do different things. Yeah.
Got a 2-part question, and the first part is, so with the red dyed concrete that's about 3 inches tall, that is the kind of pushed out part right there.
Yeah.
I've noticed that there are a lot of people, I live on Irving, and a lot of people when they're turning right are afraid to turn even though they have an open lane, because they're afraid they're going to go out into this other lane as they're heading down without rolling over that. So I think this might just be a people learning that they can roll over those. I'm assuming you can, because I have.
Yep.
But I was wondering,
2 inches tall.
yep, I was wondering if there is like a feedback portion at the end of this when these projects are done to say, you know, what worked well, what didn't work well, because those, I think that the concrete that's here, that's the standard 6-inch tall, nobody wants to run into that.
Yeah.
But this just seems to make people kind of nervous for turning. I've noticed turning right.
Yeah.
And I think that hopefully got Mary's question in there about what's the lower pink curb.
The lower pink curb, and Logan talked about it with the roundabouts, is there's a certain part of a roundabout that's mountable where we would expect folks towing trailers or longer vehicles to actually sort of hit the curb. And so we make those very shallow. They're like 2-inch curves. So that's what we did here, and actually colored it red. You know, it looks pink. It's pink. And that's only 2 inches high, because some folks will have to take that depending on what vehicle they're operating. But a lot of folks won't have to do that. And what we're trying to do is get as close to 90 as we can on intersections, so that you're not carrying the speed that you generated on River Road at 35, 40 miles an hour around this intersection into the very space we've dedicated for people who aren't in cars. So we want you to slow down and not hit that. And I haven't driven, I'll drive this on the way home actually and see if I hit any of those. The design speed for these is like 15 miles an hour. Is the other thing is people are like, well, I would have to slow way down before I make that turn. Yeah. That's the point of that. We did that on purpose.
Yeah.
But it is mountable. So if you do end up mounting that should be okay.
And for like, I drive a F-150 semi full-size truck, and for me to head south on River Road from Irving without getting my nose out into this other lane, I do have to mount it. And so I've seen a lot of.
You're turning on a red though, so that's why you can't get into this other.
I'm turning on a yeah, I'm turning on red. Yes.
So on a green, you could turn into
Yep.
that lane, obviously, but on
Yep.
red, yeah, you want to stay in this lane. And I would think that that's fine. I mean, we make
Yeah,
it
I'm-
possible because every once in a while, you're going to have to take it a little shallow. If you're at a stop and you're moving at a safe speed too. So yeah, I get it. It's fine.
I do have a question. Maybe it's my perception. When I come south on the road, it seems like that curb by the gas station there, the southwest corner, the curb is sticking out farther into the lane, the travel lane.
Okay.
Anybody else notice that?
Yeah.
And it's not parallel with the bike lane. It sticks out farther in the bike lane and somewhat of a.
What's that?
Yeah.
So I'm not the only one?
No,
Go the other one across.
Okay.
when I'm coming down there and I'm in that lane, it does feel a bit tight here.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So this will line up with basically this taper.
We're talking about the higher curb
Higher curve. This guy.
right there. Yeah. I mean, if you're right to look at it and see.
Come up here. But so when this is done and pushed out, it will be in line. And so that's why this looks like a box of parts, because we just threw the southern part in without doing the northern part yet. But it will get moved out.
The pole was in the way, so when they finish, is that right?
Right. Yeah, we haven't done the north side.
No, I'm talking about the southwest corner. It seems like the curb isn't the right angle is with the existing bike path, and it's sticks out for it. And
Yeah, well,
When
so
you
that's
come
the
there, you're gonna
bike,
be caught.
the bike lane is gonna move inside from where it currently is and then down.
This is the traffic light.
The traffic.
The traffic light, except the cement curb right on the line where the bike path used to be,
Right,
and it's very constricted.
right,
And that's on both sides.
right.
We
So
think
you're
that's a
supposed to
design
be on, not on the River Road side of that curve, but on the other side of that curve, being on your bike. Both sides.
That's the curve, and right where the bike lane used to be, there is no room. Very constricted.
On the driving portion you're talking about up here. So like on this curb up here,
Yeah,
this curb is very, yeah, this portion is pretty tight when you're coming south.
Look at it, and see if maybe we're all crazy.
well, it's not done again, so that it's gonna, yeah, I know why it looks like that. Because that's not there yet to sort of align you properly.
I think we're used to when there's a curve, we have a little bit of a buffer before the travel lane, and the curve is right to the travel lane.
Yeah, this
I
curb
think
right
that's
here.
what feels different, because
Yeah,
it's instead of that bike buffer lane, the curve goes right to that white, what would be the white line if you
Yeah.
were driving. And so it feels like when you're driving, you're on right on that curve.
A lot of people are gonna hit.
Well, yeah, they're not gonna.
I will commit to sitting down as a project manager and getting a much better understanding of where we're at right now and what happens next. Because quite frankly, I came up here last week and I expected to see at least one more of those corners done, and it's not. So I think we're not staying on schedule again. And there's probably a good reason for that, and I'd like to be able to share that. Logan, are we gonna have him at the open house in September? So either I or the project engineer will be at that meeting to talk about this intersection. Actually, that might give him nightmares, but I will be better informed, but I probably, and we'll talk about what happened here. And I will talk with him some more too about, is everything where it's supposed to be? How do we feel about where we are right now? Because I don't know, even if we have a lot of other jobs to get this done, and we've had coders here for too long, and we recognize that. And so, yeah.
Will there be, the second part of the question, I don't think that, will there be like a feedback from the community on, this was the first, do you guys like that? Should these start going up and down River Road? And
So what we are going to do as an organization, better than we have in the past, is when we're done with the thing, we usually get that thing done and then we're off to the next thing.
right,
We should spend a little bit more time on the thing we just did and ask people how it's going.
Yeah.
And so I think we'll probably be out there doing intercept surveys with people, but also, through you guys and get some stuff out on social media. Yeah, let's have a survey or something out there so that people can say, here's observations. If you do this again, don't do these things, or please don't do this again. So we want to see helpful feedback. So we want to know all of that. Because this is not an easy thing to build, as you can see. This is why it's taken us so long, other than our partner issues. But we're hopeful that this is, in the future, we would like to build more of these if we're building a signalized intersection. The other way to do it would be to build a roundabout, where again, you're moving around the outside of the intersection. So this sort of replicates that using the existing signalized construction. Any other questions on that, or I have something else to talk about?
Comment real quick. The people I talked to about the roundabouts, they'll go, no. It's all negative. So I don't know if anybody else is saying, these roundabouts are gonna be great. Do you guys hear that?
I like them.
Do you? Okay.
I do too.
I was
I
Yeah.
didn't live in Bend.
They are becoming more and more common, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that once they're installed, they're incredibly easy to maintain versus a signal. It costs us about $1 million in poles and lights and everything else to do a signalized intersection. We can do a roundabout for a little bit less than that, but if somebody drives a truck through the roundabout, it doesn't close the intersection until we can get the pole stood back up, right? So long term, it's a lot better solution for us financially. It also provides better safety outcomes, and these are both things that we want. We want longer lasting, more durable, more forgiving infrastructure that costs us less money in the long term, and roundabouts do all of that. A lot of state transportation departments are moving towards roundabouts. You're going to start to see some in the ODOT system. You're going to start to see them in more cities because financially they make sense. From a safety perspective, they make sense. And from a level service perspective, they make sense too. Now, there are a couple issues like what you had talked about in terms of how do pedestrians cross them when they're not time for traffic to stop. And I share those concerns. We've talked the disability community, especially people with low vision, because they're listening for cars. And if you always see cars going around a roundabout, it's really concerning what it can be. Which is why you want to put up one of those flashing beacons again and have an audible tone so that people know when to press that and be able to cross. And ODOT has some rules around that we're going to follow the best that we can when we install roundabouts. It'll be a little bit of a learning process for to figure out when to do that.
All right, we got somebody virtual. Leah, go ahead. Oh,
I was just going to say I've used them a lot up in Washington, and they make traffic that's much higher volume than what I've ever seen on River Road continue to flow way better than what I've seen on River Road with the existing infrastructure. So I look forward to them.
If it's designed correctly, they do a lot of good for us, and that's why to date we've always hired a contractor to design them for us because we're not comfortable at this point designing them. So we've always hired national experts to design these because they've been doing them all over the country and they know exactly what the details are to get it right. So we're going to do that for the foreseeable future, and then hopefully we've gleaned enough information we don't have to hire them anymore and we can start designing them on our own. We're not quite there yet.
As long as they're single lane.
Yeah.
When you get into multi-lane roundabouts.
Yeah.
It gets more complicated.
It is. The protocol is I have to take the inside lane until you have to keep moving back and forth and do the 2 lanes.
Yeah, we can move on to the next one.
Yeah.
I recognize some folks who are aware of the Westbank path extension. And I'm not avoiding you guys. I just don't have any updates that are worth sharing because we have, quite frankly, we don't have enough engineers on staff to do all the project work that we have. This is a contract that we got through ODOT, and our build date has been moved to, I believe, 27. And so we've got some time until then to start the design again. And so this one got pushed a little bit. For a while, I was going to hire a design engineer to design it for us so that would keep us on schedule. Been told not to do that. So I've been waiting for an engineer to come back around and be available for us. And I think that's going to happen momentarily because he's almost done with his current project. So we're going to jump on this again soon, next couple of weeks. But what we have done is we've gone out there and surveyed, and this is a terrible graphic, but this is Hunsaker, and this is Echo Lane. So northbound, we sort of looked at what the alignment might look like, and then crossed Echo Lane, and then sort of hugged the outside of basically the Delta Santa gravel property. And that's as far as we've gotten. We haven't gone any further than that. We've talked about potentially surveying to Zane Lane all the way down there. I think we ran into a bunch of blackberries and stuff over here, quite frankly, so we couldn't really get a good survey of what's going on over there. And in the meantime, I have talked to 4J, who owns the property between Admiral and Zane Lane, where potentially we could have the shared use path then connect into Zane Lane, which would then go north into the new Santa Clara Community Park, which would be ideal. We've got a limited amount of funding. And so at this point, we're concentrating on a connection. And that connection is going to be at least from the existing path on Hunsaker up to at least Admiral Street. And we haven't made any determinations on that yet, but that's what we surveyed so far. And I'd like to get an estimate, a preliminary estimate prepared, given what we know about materials costs, as well as delivery times, and what we've contractually committed to ODOT to see how much further we can get with the money that we have. We've also talked about the crossings of River Loop 1 and Wilkes to get to the school and to get to the park. And so I think those are all critical components. Again, I haven't been able to jump back on this yet because I haven't had a design engineer available to tell me what's going to work and what's not going to work. But Logan mentioned, again, coming September, please. September 11th at, where is it again? North Eugene High School Gymnasium. And I will have layouts with maps. And we'll be able to draw on them and talk about all the things that are going on And potentially I can have the design engineer too, and we can sort of talk about what some of the constraints are and what our timeline is, because by then we'll have a better idea, because he'll become available and be able to start working on this again. So at this point, we've done some surveying, not a lot. We need to do more. When we do more, we'll be able to put together some estimates, figure out how we're doing compared to budget, and then figure out how much path we can deliver. So that's the update on that.
Question 21.
One comment. When southbound on River Road into Hunsaker, when they had it down to one lane, there was one lane for a long time. And I didn't observe any work being done there, but they still had one lane for a long time. For like no reason. Who is that? The contractor that's doing that?
So once a contractor, so because schedules move around so much, and because even the utility companies hire contractors, it's like calling the cable company, and they're going to be there between 4 and 8, and you just got to sort of be around. And when we call these contractors, they'll be here sometime between Tuesday and Friday, and so you got to leave your closure up from Tuesday to Friday in case they show up. And then if they don't show up, well, they're going to come back the next week, so you leave the closure up, right? And so that's sort of what's been happening.
Well, if you've observed during that time, traffic was back clear up to Ferndale.
Yeah.
Like, it was for no reason. They could have moved the cones out for a day.
And this is why we're having that conversation. It's like, we need to get firmer timelines, firmer commitments. We've got penalties that we can start to enforce if things start running late. Now, we don't generally do that, but this can make the contractor sort of come back online. If we're saying, okay, for every day that you're not doing anything, it's $1,000. Maybe that's enough for them to start moving things. We've got a couple tools like that. And our traffic folks have noticed the same thing. They're like, what are we doing? And so we need to figure out what we're doing. And we've been having a lot of conversations around that. And again, I was told that we're back on schedule. But again, I was disappointed, an hour ago when I drove through and I didn't see a whole little corner. So I'll figure out what that's about, send you guys an email.
Thank you.
Is there a possibility in the to have the light turn right and turn around?
Yeah. So that's that leading interval. It's a technical term, but basically it means that we've got it at like Silver Lane and River Road, where the bike signal, the walk signal will come up for 4 to 7 seconds before the green light comes up. And that should clear that out enough, or at least get people out in front of like where a car can actually see there's people there, so that they don't encroach into that area. Sometimes
That's only for pedestrians, because there's if you're in the bike lane, you're not supposed to get up on the sidewalk.
but at this one, remember, you're going to be using the crosswalks, and you're going to be using the same pen signals, so that will work.
Okay, any more?
Just have a quick question. That intersection, River Avenue and River Road, is any thought being given to do something like this there and make that work better? It's a nice.
We have exhausted everything that we can do with the signal infrastructure that exists in that location. This is a systemic issue that deals with Beltline and River Road and the signals probably all the way up from Division and then all the way down to Silver River Ave. That whole corridor needs to be better thought. And, we're sort of pressuring ODOT to come up with some more innovative solutions than just some better signal timing, because we've done everything we can possibly do with signal timing and it still doesn't seem to work very well. And so we're expecting something more than that. Again, we had just talked a little bit before about roundabouts that wouldn't necessarily fit there, but all things are possible with money. When I was driving through other states, and I hit like 12 of them last month. I was on vacation, and man, I was going through roundabouts off of interstate and freeway interchanges and just never stopping at all. And I'm like, it seems solvable. I don't know why we're not doing this. Other than it's a lot of money and it's a lot of change. And we don't have the experts necessarily on staff to feel comfortable with that amount of change. But I think things are moving in that direction. I just don't see it moving very quickly. But we're aware of, River Road at Beltline is a big problem. ODOT knows it's a big problem. We remind them that it's a big problem, and they assure us that they're working on something.
I know it's been brought up a lot and got brought up again tonight, but that syncing of lights, I know there's the Lane County and ODOT and Eugene. I've taken pictures where I'm sitting at a green light, but there's a red light next. And so everyone's there. And then right as ours turns red, that next one goes green. And then that block becomes empty. And then we get green. And by the time we get to the next one, we're red. And it just leads to a lot of
So
back.
there's a lot of nuance in signals. And I just met with the signal guys actually out in the yard today on a different project. And I was saying sort of the same thing. Can we shorten up this cycle and lengthen this cycle? And generally the answer is yes, unless somebody triggered a pedestrian signal. Because we can preempt a green signal to be less because cars can then stop. If we've got a pedestrian, especially somebody with a mobility limitation out in the lanes, and we're going to say now don't walk or be on the other side, they don't necessarily have the ability to move faster. And so we have to run the entire walk length for River Road, which is 7 lanes wide. And so that takes up most of the time that you're probably seeing. So next time you see it, see if you can see a walk signal on, because that could be a big part of it. Otherwise, I think all of the signals up there are actuated. So we've got like loop detectors or cameras. And so they should be responding to traffic. But sometimes we can't end a cycle if we've still got the pedestrian going, and that's a safety thing.
Whatever's going on 6th and 7th, it should just mimic that, because that just seems to, it's like they just open up the gates for
So
you and then
6th
it
and 7th
shuts down for everybody.
So 6th and 7th are not actuated, they are timed.
Oh, it's lovely.
So downtown, well, depends on who you are. So if you're a pedestrian who's trying to get to the other side of 6th or 7th, it will take you about 56 seconds to even get like a walk signal. So you'll be standing there for about a minute. And so that's why when you see people sort of running across 6th and 7th, they've decided not to comply with that because they felt like it was too long to wait. And so, again, I hate to come back to roundabouts and other solutions, but we've got other things out there that would sort of solve a lot of these issues and other tools that we would like to try. We're doing the best that we can with the system that we have. And yeah, some of the time stuff works really good. Some of the actuated stuff works really good because it knows when people are there or not there. But none of it works great for everybody all the time.
At one point, we talked about that intersection where it's an all-go pedestrian. Like when it stops for one, it stops for everybody. So
Pedestrian scramble.
everybody can go.
Yeah.
And then it's not pedestrian and then it's cars. And that, like, is that a thing? Do they do that?
Yeah, we had that at 13th and Alder for a little while. That takes, so it's not going to work on a corridor like River Road because it's so wide. Imagine walking diagonally across from the southwest corner up to the northeast corner and how long that is. Now it's 3 seconds per foot.
Yeah, okay.
So it works on small intersections and like 2-lane roads, but it doesn't work on big corridors.
Okay.
Yeah, on the news or something the other night, they were talking about some of the larger cities starting to use the AI stuff for traffic flow and improvements.
We've got that
That
too.
won't happen in my lifetime here, but
Well, no, it's happening already. We've got that. They say it does all sorts of things that we haven't quite managed to get it to do. In fact, we've got a vendor coming down this week to observe the things that they said it could do that we can't make it do. So we're trying to get better with the AI, but I don't think the technology is fully there.
Artist right lane, crossing all the lanes of traffic. But ignoring lanes, it's a big block. It doesn't matter if it's on the line. They just start crossing from cars right.
actually we're going from one lane to that turn lane into 2 left turn lanes.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people coming this way, these cars go over, this car can move over.
No, I'm not up there, just up to turn, they could turn right onto the freeway, they go like, terrifying. But they cross from that one all the way in front of all the cars.
Because the solid line of cars that's in the left-hand lane. And so if they come out, yeah.
That's like a bypass lane.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much time we have.
How about 5 more minutes?
Logan, can you talk for just a minute or two about automated enforcement and how we're going to start piloting that? Because our police are overburdened. They can't be everywhere and observe every intersection all the time. So there are tools available that communities have been using with some success. And we're going to start looking at piloting one of those next year. Yeah, too.
Yeah, just to give you a brief summary. So Public Works is working with EPD and municipal court to design a small scale automated enforcement pilot program. And we'll look at red light cameras at some big intersections. You want me to- Sorry if anyone didn't hear me online. So we are working on a small automated enforcement pilot program with Public Works, EPD, and municipal court that would test red light cameras at probably about 3 intersections in town. We're still in the early stages of designing that and working through how we're going to get a vendor on board to help us with that. We're estimating that the soonest it would be up and running is probably next summer.
And that's cameras. And
Yeah,
so
red light cameras, we could do some speed enforcement on it under certain conditions.
And then, so if that goes the way that it's been going in other communities, which means, well, it works the way that we want it to, then potentially we could expand that program. But EPD wants us to test it before we make the investment, and that's reasonable. So we're going to start doing that next year and potentially grow the program after that so that we can have better enforcement of some of the behavior that we're all seeing out there.
Be a gold mine on River Road. It's $300 a pop.
They tried that out